Hi everyone, thank you for coming on Mother's Day. A lot of people are off doing other things. Welcome. So I was thinking about, I was telling Michael Wilding and I were talking before we came on, and I was thinking how I don't usually feel much. My mother wasn't terribly into Mother's Day, which is part of her personality. Um, Slightly oppositional qualities, and and although I think we would make her a rather sort of probably inedible breakfast when we were very small, and the but I was thinking about, well, who do I know who's a good? I would think is a good mother, and I realize it's one of those adjectives you can't quite. I suppose you can definitely think some people are bad mothers, Mainly, it's beyond good and bad being a role like being a mother. And so there's a few things some great stuff about mothers in the world, Guan Yin, the eternal feminine, and, uh, and I remember a friend of mine who, long ago, and where was this thing? And he was one of those guys who was, a handsome sort of guy who was a well-known psychotherapist and was sort of kind of gay, pretty much closeted gay, and he had in those days you would pretend you weren't by having a date you took everywhere, and he had this wonderful friend. If you were if you're a lesbian, you had somebody called a beard. I don't know I don't know what she was, but she was this great, really wonderful woman and they were just really best friends, and they would go everywhere. But I remember him one day at a party suddenly reciting the prayer for the mother and weeping. And so I'll say, and so this is an ancient hymn to Mary, but it's kind of a version of the hymn to Isis, I think, actually. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this vale of tears. Turn then, most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy towards us, and after this our exile show us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, clement means sort of peaceful and calm in weather. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary, pray for us, Holy Mother of God. So, and then, and you'll find that everywhere. You'll find that with Guan Yin is the, I don't know, Taoist version, Buddhist version of Isis and Mary. And so, and we chant Kanzeon, Namubutsu. And so there's something, I think the great archetypal forces are just really moving, and we have to respect them and pay attention to them. And the and here's I'll just read a little bit of this. In the Golden Ass, Lucius, who's been turned into a donkey because he's being a jerk, and so a witch turned him into a donkey because he was obsessed with sex, and also was annoying the witch, and and but the chariot of the sun was at the point of ending its day's course across the sky, so I too resigned myself to rest, and was presently overcome by a sweet sound sleep. Not long afterwards I awoke in sudden terror. A dazzling full moon was rising from the sea. It is a secret hour that the moon goddess, sole sovereign of humanity, is possessed of her greatest power and majesty. She is the shining deity by whose divine influence not only all beasts, wild and tame, but all inanimate things as well are invigorated, whose ebbs and flows control the rhythm of all bodies whatsoever, whether in the air, on the earth, or below the sea. And so I offer this prayer to the Supreme Goddess, Blessed Queen of Heaven, whether you are known as, and there's a whole list of her names, and the good things she did, like Ceres, the original Harvest Mother cereals, and things like that. But I won't go through those. But that's really just like saying Hail Queen of Heaven. And there's, I poured out the full bitterness of my oppressed heart, returned to my sandy hollow after praying, and once more sleep overcame me. Remember, he's a donkey. Scarcely closed my eyes before the apparition of a woman began to rise from the middle of the sea with so lovely a face that the gods themselves would have fallen down in adoration. Her long, thick hair fell in tapering ringlets on her lovely neck and was crowned with an intricate chaplet which was woven of every kind of flower. So you get, everywhere you get the Queen of Heaven, Kuan Yin holding a child and the flower. The archetypes are just, the great fundamental things, like, people remember their mother. And I had a very complicated relationship with my own mother, but I just noticed how much I'm feeling thankful and all that on Mother's Day. Kind of nice, thankful for the universe holds us in reverie. We hold each other. If we love someone, we hold them in reverie. And in a way, we are being held by the dream of the universe. And I think meditation does that for us. Some people didn't have a mother, or their mother abandoned them, or something. And but meditation just, in a way, no matter what we do, meditation is a good mother, and it allows us to come back, and it tolerates us, and how bad our attention is, or how pissed off we are, or whatever it is, however we're behaving, meditation just accepts it and is gracious and welcomes. And that way we get a certain kind of peace, and it allows us to connect with people. The connection, psychoanalysts think it's if the connection with the mother is good, there are a lot of toing and froing about this, but, children whose mothers adore them and the children behave very badly, things like that. But there's the capacity to be held in somebody's reverie and regard, and meditation gives it that. It is the reverie and regard of the universe holds us when we're meditating. The Guan Yin holds us, we can say. And you can see this at every level of the culture. Like, here's a really kind of sweet thing that there's a basketball player that some of you may know about, who's like a very tall, like brilliant, amazing talent, called Kevin Durant. And many years ago, he won the MVP for basketball. And he brought his mother along, and she knew he'd mentioned her, but she didn't know. And he told her whole story. She was 21 years old when she had 2 kids, a single parent, and they lived in an apartment with no furniture, but she still made them feel loved. And when she was hungry, she still found food for them. And Durant said to his mom, "You made us believe. You kept us off the street, put clothes on our backs, food on the table. When you didn't eat, you made sure we ate. You went to sleep hungry, but you sacrificed for us." And then she said, later on, everybody in the basketball world started calling her Mama, and she said, when someone calls you Mama, that means something. There's a lot of respect and honor attached to it that I hold dear, and it doesn't matter the age. I have grandmothers and grandfathers calling me Mama. It's a level of accountability and responsibility I have to people. I'm very mindful of my responsibility of being called Mama. That means something to me. So it's kind of lovely. It's the same as, Hail Queen of Heaven, Mama. So it was very, very dear. And the final thing I guess I want to say here is Rilke, the great poet Rainer Maria Rilke, had he wrote he was sort of got sort of possessed by a muse of poetry and wrote these elegies that got called the Duino elegies because the first ones were written at a castle of Duino on the coast, on the Adriatic coast. But his last ones, I can't remember where they were in. But he describes the soul after death being led by, a guiding spirit who then names the stars and uh, the cradle, the path, the puppet, window, the burning book. But in the southern sky, pure as if held in the palm of a hand, that clear gleaming M, which means mothers. so, so that's kind of sweet. Here's a thing. He wrote a couple of moving things about his mother, but this in memoriam, Seamus Heaney, and the cool that came off the sheets just off the line made me think the damp must still be in them. But when I took my corners of the linen and pulled against her, first straight down the hem and then diagonally, then flapped and shook the fabric like a sail in a crosswind, they made a dried out, undulating thwack. So we'd stretch and fold and end up hand to hand for a split second as if nothing had happened. For nothing had that had not always happened beforehand, day by day, just touch and go, coming close again by holding back, in moves where I was X and she was O, inscribed in sheets she'd sewn from ripped out flour sacks. It's a sort of Irish version of Kevin Durant's mom, And here's the same. It's the same sequence of poems, which is in memoriam for his mom. When all the others were away at mass, I was all hers as we peeled potatoes. They broke the silence, let fall one by one like solder weeping off the soldering iron. Potatoes let fall one by one like solder weeping off the soldering iron. Cold comforts set between us, things to share, gleaming in a bucket of clean water. And again let fall. Little pleasant splashes from each other's work would bring us to our senses. So while the parish priest at her bedside went hammer and tongs at the prayers for the dying, and some were responding and some crying, I remembered her head bent towards my head, her breath in mine, our fluent dipping knives, never closer the whole rest of our lives. Becomes the model for like that working together. And what if you are Kuan Yin holding the world in your reverie? I was thinking about, the complexity of the mother relationship. And my mother was, in a kind of war with the world, I think, really, a sort of Scots-Irish war with the world. Is this a private fight or can anyone join? That's an attitude. But I could always, if someone was hungry or needed something, I could always bring someone home and she'd put them up for the night and the sofa or things like that. And so if I was hungry, there was always food. So it's good enough. There's a saying that the good enough mother is a concept in psychoanalysis where she feeds you and she doesn't kill you. That's good enough. Stops you running on the freeway too, probably. But of course, there's a lot better ways to do too, where you have the feeling in the heart, And so I suppose that's what Guan Yin is, that feeling we have for each other in our hearts. So I notice Alison Atwell has a picture of her mother here. Anyway, I don't know if you want to say anything about mothers, but it's one of those LA movie pictures.
Yeah, John asked me this morning what this Mother's Day was like for me. And it wasn't until he asked me that I realized this is actually the very first Mother's Day of my entire life, where my mother is no longer here. She died about 3 weeks ago, I think. And when I was setting up my altar this morning, I have right next to it a pile of the family albums that somehow ended up in the, in distributing my mother's things at the end. I ended up with the albums. There's a photograph. I thought I'd put a photograph, I'll show you, of my mother. And see, it's her wedding day. And she was just 18 years old. She was soon to have 9 children, which I think you have to start young in order to achieve. And then just a long and a kind of amazingly adventurous and surprising life, considering where she began with all of that. And she died at age 95. She didn't, she only had a high school diploma before she had 9 children. And then she went on, after she had all of the kids, to go back to school and get a bachelor's and a master's from UCLA and became a psychotherapist. But the feeling of not having her alive today, you know, what that's like. It's almost, I was thinking about Seamus Heaney, and when his parents, the last of his parents, died, I don't know which one it was, his mother or father, he said it was like the roof came off the house. And there's some way that feeling of there's just like nothing but space all around me, from me all the way through infinity, through the outer galaxies, through space and time. Some way, my actual mother was some sort of like an umbrella almost. You know, as a child, I definitely felt, you know, you feel the very much like quail. I was reading this morning, like I was wondering what quail, how they feed their young. I'm very much interested in mothers lately, because in the spring, of course, May, why would they have Mother's Day in May? Because there's just everywhere you look, there's mothers and babies everywhere. In fact, when we were sitting, I heard we have a pair of red-shouldered hawks that raise their, I think they just have one baby hawk every year. And for the first time this morning, I hear one of the parents, you know, in their usual kind of extremely alarming call if you're, you know, a small furry animal. And then I hear the fledglings call, and it just had absolutely none of the menace or authority of the adult yet. Um, so everywhere you look, there's this mothers holding the young in their reverie. And I was thinking about the quail. We have quail, you know, just like hordes of quail that come through our garden. And what they feed their babies, I just couldn't figure it out. So I actually had to look it up. And after 2 days, the baby quail, they just go and forage. They can get things for themselves. So that feeling of being held by the source of things, the original ground with which we all come from, and through our actual mothers pass through into the world. As John was saying earlier, that the meditation, we find the original source in ourselves of refuge, with which our mothers, our actual mothers, either provided or they didn't, or something in between. And but it's always there in the universe and inside of each one of us.
Very good. John Joseph, you're somebody who thinks about this sort of matter.
I really loved, John, your image of meditation as as mother. Meditation is the the valley spirit, and how supportive and nurturing and healing, and ultimately leads to awakening. And it's a beautiful, beautiful image of meditation as mother. And it made me think, when I first started meditating, I was young and I was still living at home. And we too had a large family of 6 kids, and my mom had them in about 8 years. and we had a very small house, a little over about 1,000 square feet. So we were all stacked on top of each other. And when I started meditating, there was one tiny little space of wall in a room we called the TV room, which had a couch and baskets of unfolded clothes and an ironing board, and that was about it, and a TV. And I had this tiny little space where I'd get up early in the morning and I'd sit facing the wall, and my mother would come in, and without saying a word, she'd be in her slip, and she'd grab her nurse's uniform, and she was working as a nurse, and she'd just be working on the ironing board, just about 3 feet away from me, and ironing her uniform, and then she'd finish, and then she'd leave. And it was just kind of touching that my mother and I were sort of meditating together. And after I moved out, she would often ask me, "Are you still doing that Zen?" And I said, "Yes, Mom, I'm still doing Zen." She said, "Oh, I'm happy because it's good for you."
Thank you. That's great. Ellie, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I was thinking about my mom, and my mom and dad have been dead like 45 years. So they feel very much gate, but very much in my life. And that it's more of a sense of, when I think of her, she was the wheel of the household. And I was one of 4 kids. And the sense of honey, I always knew I was loved and cared for, but it was always mayhem. And John, my mother, was a nurse too, so she was always called by the community, and we lived in an apartment in New York, and she was always called if someone was hit by a car, or if someone needed their ears pierced, or there was a strange rash that one of the kids had. So she felt as though she was loved by this very large community. And now as I have children and grandchildren and great nieces, and I feel as though she's in this field that I'm a part of. And now I can honey my grandchildren, spread and pour honey all over them. But when I think of my mother, I feel the field, and that field feels like meditation, because she's a thread in it. So there's this sense of just being without words. I often hear her say, "Ellie, if you love the world loves you back." And as many of you know, I'm traveling, and I think I got that from her. So there's this sweetness about the world as well. And just love to all you mothers.
Amelia, would you like to say something?
Yeah. Today feels poignant, especially because Philip's mom died last year on Mother's Day. So we've been remembering that, and I'm having my mom come for lunch today. So I've been thinking, I was making a cake this morning, and I was thinking about my mom made Sunday dinner for all of us for decades, probably 2 or 3 decades. And so while I was putting like flour on the blueberries so they don't fall into the bottom of the cake, I was thinking about all those Sunday dinners, and all the time spent reading all of this. Yeah, so the scent of the cake is wafting in now.
Very good. The smell of the mother, the scent, the aroma. Well, good. To meditate, be in the reverie of the universe. The universe becomes the mother. And with your own mother, I think it's really important to learn to say no. Because you have to, in a certain sense, your mother doesn't always know that you're separate from her, and you don't always know that, and so you have to find out and say no as well as yes. And sometimes you're wrong when you say no, but sometimes you're right. And that's just part of a deep relationship. You can say yes and no. So thinking about Kuan Yin as somebody she pulls us out of hell when we're stuck there, things like that. But we also say no to, So Bill, Sheen, and your friend, is it Mike? I can't remember. And do you have either of you have anything to say?
We are unmuted, yes. Some of these images are so particular and tiny and singular, and yet they reverberate through decade after decade. And the one I have of my mother is I had sinus issues when I was a kid, and she used to take me to downtown Manhattan to a specialist. And it was very scary, really. Nothing happened, but it was scary. And afterwards, she would take me to the Horn and Hard Art cafeteria, which was a total delight. And you'd put a nickel in, and I could get what I wanted. And I always chose a plate of mashed potatoes. And that were the most delicious mashed potatoes that ever were created, or so I thought. And that's what I actually remember today.
The Valley Spirit is mashed potatoes after the doctor. Did you want to say anything too?
Oh, sure. My mother had a very long dying process, and I had a difficult relationship with her growing up. We grew up together. She was only 18 when I was born. She was very immature. But in the last 2 years of her dying process, she was in a wonderful Filipino boarding house of amazing women. And anyway, I remember going to my mother. She would look at me. She always recognized who I was. And she was really nurturing in those last 2 years, lying in her bed with no teeth. And she would say, I love you. And one time she said, I'm sorry. And I didn't even want to ask her what she was sorry about, but I felt that you have nothing to be sorry for. And I felt so much love for her in those last 2 years when I would go and visit her with her no teeth and her wonderful, sweet smile.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Some people, as they're dying, they kind of transform. Some people transform after they die. My mother improved a lot after she died. So I can have conversations with her now. She's still, my dad is easier to have conversations with, which was true in life. But Meredith, do you have anything you want to say?
So many. I'm touched by everyone. So many memories coming through. But I, like our last speaker, Bill's friend. I don't know who that is, but I was thinking about my own mother, who her father died when my sister and I were infants. Took his own life, and so she kind of disappeared from our lives, but came back in her dying time. And I will never forget her looking around the room at me and my 4 siblings, and you could see that all that armor had finally come down. And I think each one of us felt really treasured. I also was thinking, however, that sometimes it's the other way around, and a parent loses the child. And the memory that was coming to mind was being in Rome and seeing the Pieta in the Vatican, and just being absolutely overcome at the incredible beauty of that carving of the picture of a mother saying, I hold you, I, the Valley Spirit, hold you until your death and beyond. It was so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. So, Alison or Peter, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I would just say to say I had a complicated relationship with my mother would be just a huge understatement. And in brief, I adored her, and I eventually tried to sort of parent her as a teenager myself, but yeah, I would say despite all the difficulty, and I won't go into this extremity of it, I loved her. And that stayed with me. That stayed with me in all its complication and in all the places it's taken me in life. I'm always kind of looking at the sort of, maybe this is a personal archetypal image of a woman in a leopard skin coat on the last bar stool. Completely enchanting and dangerous.
Very good. Did you want to speak? Do you have a leopard skin coat, Alison?
I don't have a leopard. I do have like this velvet one that has fabric that Peter was I guess what I would add with my mom died in the last year too, and so this is my first Mother's Day without her, and she was someone that was hard to reach, in a lot of ways, elusive, and did the I don't know, kind of did the role really well, but she was hard to reach. And at the memorial for her, that her absence was felt in a new way. Like my siblings and I had an easier time with each other. It was like we weren't trying to get our mother. We weren't, vying for attention. And this piece that you said, it kept resonating, that piece about the Valley Spirit, elusive as gossamer, use it, it will never fail you, is to my right here. I have a painting that as a child that my mother did, that I always loved. And she was a real lover of beauty. She made her home beautiful, and I kind of want to show everybody it. So it's right here, and I grew up with it. I don't know if you can see it or not, but
We can. Yes, we can.
So, and it was
It's quite a painting.
yeah, and she did it before I was born. So, that original face. She did it before she met my father. She was an artist before she became a wife and mother, which kind of took over. Anyway, just wonderful to be here, hearing all the mothers' tales, all the mother stories.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Peter. And thank you so much for coming. I'm very moved by all the stories. I wanted to hear more. And somehow you can tell, the world that Nirvana is samsara, the world of the stuff of the life and the heart and the stories of mothers and childhood. That is the enlightened world. So thank you very much.